let me get your reaction to something. I'm just wondering um, how you would apply Dr. King's message of nonviolence to today's political realities, having a movement, as you say, rooted in love. And I ask that question because Dr. Anthea Butler, professor at the University of Pennsylvania, who I'm sure you know who she is. Let me read this quote to you um, she said to the Washington Post, quote, when you say we shall overcome, this is not a generation now who will let you beat them in streets with hoses and dogs. They will fight back. That image is a passive image. No one likes that. It doesn't feel like it works because look where we are. Love your
Mhm.
reaction to that.
Yeah, I have great respect for Dr. Butler, and I have great respect for anyone who is interested in helping to liberate those who are oppressed. The reality is, Dr. King even said once that a riot is the voice of the unheard. When you do not listen to people, when you ignore them, when you pass laws that separate them from the rest of society, when you discriminate against people because of their race, when you discriminate against folks because of their class, when you expel duly elected members from the state house, when you weaponize police officers to be weapons of the state to oppress and to silence folks when they are peacefully protesting for the right for the right to protest against police brutality, when those actions are being taken by those in power, as we saw under an ex-president in Lafayette Square and after George Floyd's lynching, and as we saw even in Memphis, Tennessee, after Tyree Nichols' lynching. When people are being oppressed consistently, there comes a moment where things can and sometimes have in the past boiled over. And what I would only take issue with Dr. Butler is that those images of Black folks being bitten by dogs, those images of Black folks marching on Bloody Sunday across the Edmunds Pettus Bridge, including the great Honorable John Lewis, who were beaten by those on horses and on horseback, these white supremacists who were committing violence against them, those children who marched in Birmingham, who were singing, even if my mama and daddy can't go, I'm still going. I do not believe that that was an act of just passivism. I believe that there is some moral courage that it takes to be willing to risk your body and risk your personhood for people who you will never meet. They never knew our names, but they knew that we would be inheriting this country. And so they gave what they could, the best of their service. And nonviolent resistance is how they contributed to the movement. And the question for us is, can we get tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people to resist to the oppression? Can we get children to go out and to march against their deaths in schools by fighting against gun violence? Can Dr. Butler and I team up to get hundreds of thousands of people to come to Washington to demand that Congress pass the George Floyd and Policing Act? Can we mobilize and organize and activate people in the way that our ancestors did in defense of our democracy? Because what I do believe about this generation and my generation and Generation Z is that the lessons of our ancestors are the lessons that we need in this present moment, because where we are now is not where we would like to be, but it is certainly not where we could be if they didn't put their bodies on the line. It's certainly not where we could be if they did not protest and if they did not advocate in the ways that they did. The reality is that the government has a monopoly on violence as it's articulated in a lot of literature. And so it's not that we're going to outgun the police departments. It's not that we're going to outgun the US military, but it is something quite powerful when you think about the lessons of Jesus, when you think about the lessons of faith, that is there a moral high ground that we can have that cannot be compromised? And when you're talking about the eradication of poverty, when you're talking about a movement for justice rooted in love, the reality is, can we outlove them, and can we outorganize them, and can we outvote them, and can we outmarch them, and can we do more than we ever have done before to change these systems? And the reality is, the violence that is enacted upon Black bodies is wrong and is immoral. And I am never going to okay or say that Bull Connor or the people in positions of power now were ever right. What they did was immoral, and the violence they enacted upon Black bodies, it resonates to us today. And the reality of this moment is, even if they are not swinging with billy clubs, today they swing gavels in the Tennessee General Assembly. So what will we do about that? Will we elect more leaders? who are black and who are progressive into positions to stop the proliferation of bills and of legislation that's reducing us to second class citizenship. 20% of black people in the state of Tennessee cannot vote. How will we fight back then? We have now education on the chopping block, schools banning books all across this country, schools banning Toni Morrison's Beloved, schools banning LGBTQIA authors. How will we fight back? We need the resistance and the persistence that our ancestors showed us from cotton fields to the civil rights movement to this present day in order for us to resist by mobilizing, organizing, and activating. And so I understand Dr. Butler's position, right? The violence and white folks just attacking people physically is not something that we will be willing to accept, and no one should be willing to accept. And we must realize that though they have a monopoly on power and they can use it and have wielded it when we have peacefully protested in that way, we must be deeply concerned, maybe even more so, about the way that the institutions are being degraded in this country and how our
Well,
democracy is dying.